we said some things are consistent and it's eternal or timeless about politics and political science. But podcasts are something new. But there are some aspects of it that would be timeless, right? So based on your own research, right, what was it? What works about podcasts? What similarities do podcasts have or do they don't have with mainstream media? Could you share us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, podcasts, like any other medium of communication, is obviously a space that you can use to communicate ideas, right, and to gain support, mobilize followers, and so on and so forth. Bring people onto your side. Present yourself in a way that's appealing, attractive, charismatic. So, like any communicative device, right, which is vital in any kind of political process, podcasts are just part of this ecosystem. But there are some things about podcasts that I think make them a little bit different, as you say, and I'm really here talking about, this whole range of different types of podcasts, right? But I'm really talking here about the kind of podcast that's like the one that we're on right now, right? Where you have hosts and you have guests who come on, and the format is broadly looser. Its values are different from your standard public communication, where you have to get your message clear, you get it scripted, you have to be very aligned with the key messages that you want to send across. But with podcasts, I think there's a kind of looseness to it that can be a good thing because it gives politicians the chance to present their ideas in a much less encapsulated way, right? It's much less tight and crystallized, and you don't have to use sound bites, basically.
Right.
So your personality comes across a lot more, and I think many of the politicians, I think, find that a very refreshing way of connecting with their potential supporters. And I think podcasts afford these kinds of possibilities, right? So you come across more conversational, there's less of a scriptedness to it, personalities can come across much more naturally. After you warm up as well, I think once all the guardrails come down, you get to see the person, right?
Yeah.
You get to see the person. But at the same time, podcasts are also spaces where very skillful politicians are able to produce a kind of authenticity, the appearance of authenticity, right? This is not to say it's fake, but authenticity is something also, it's a kind of aesthetic as well, right? You come on and, it may happen, it may not, depends on the chemistry with the host, it depends on the kind of environment you get into. Is it hostile? Is it friendly? Is it neutral? And sometimes hosts also expect you to kind of perform in a straightforward interview format, but sometimes there is no preparation, right? You're not given the question, like this one, for example, right? You've not given us any questions, so we don't really know where it's going. And there's something very edgy about that. So it keeps you on your toes. But once the relationship is warmed up a little bit online, then I think a certain kind of authenticity emerges. And if there isn't authenticity, it comes across very clearly, right? So I think podcasts are interesting to me for those kinds of reasons.
So that was exactly what I was thinking. You said the personality will come out. What if a person has no personality? Is that why? What about, sometimes when I see the politicians, especially in 2020, the PAP new politicians, it's almost like they were robotic, and they were very scripted. And all of them were. There was one message: rags to riches, humble beginnings. And
exactly, right?
It seemed at and I felt like, my God, this feels so. And it could be that they were being genuine, but it just felt so fake. And it's not. Who knows whether a person is authentic or not, right? But we can only judge by the appearance, like you say, right? And they just sounded so not authentic to me. And maybe is that why some politicians don't go on podcasts and That's why some people thrive on podcasts. I guess for the opposition also, because maybe they do not get mainstream media time, they are forced to go on podcasts, and that's why you see them. Maybe you see a different side of Chi Soon Juan that prior to social media you would have never seen, right?
No, I think absolutely. I think podcasts are not something for everyone. This is quite clear, right? And it's not necessarily because someone has no personality or whatever, but it can be quite harrowing to come on a podcast, right? So you could just be nervous. That's all. You do have in an ordinary interaction. Pressing the flesh and that kind of thing. You might be very warm and you might be very personable in real life, but a podcast again is a very peculiar kind of situation, and people may just freeze or whatever, so you don't get that. But I think in the case that you were talking about when they were trotting out the candidates, right, for the PAP slate and all of that, I think the problem with that one was just the totally orchestrated way in which it was done, right? I pity the candidates who came up, because probably if the leash was not so tight, right, they would probably have a lot more interesting things to say, right? But I guess the messaging, and again, at the party level, whatever, they're probably experimenting as well with, how much media training to do and what kind of media. And if you don't trust your people, then you're going to come, with a very tight set of instructions. This is the message, right? You humble background, right? Because humble background, and now you're so successful, therefore meritocracy is proved, right? So all these kinds of it's a very heavy burden to carry, and anybody carrying this burden and coming across on screen, you've got to be a real pro to come across looking good, right? So I think that was just a mistake. I doubt if they're going to do that again, right? And they found it footing.
I'll be shocked if they do something like that. But don't you think that it is also the nature of the beast, like large parties, so PAP, and I guess WP, as it becomes, or if it becomes stronger, they would want to control the messaging more, and therefore each candidate will become replaceable by the other, like, because none of them gets to do their own thing. Like, it's very difficult to find like someone especially if you think about the 2020 slate, right? How many Singaporeans can really think, okay, what is this person's personality?
I mean, that's true, because in a sense, I mean, the larger question perhaps is what is a voter voting for, right? Are they voting for their representative that's going to speak in parliament on their behalf? Is it that sort of idea? In which case, then their personality would matter a bit more, right? Is this person someone I can relate with? Is this person empathetic? Does this person have a background that's not so distant from my own that they can understand the problems that I'm going through and therefore can speak for me, right? So is it that kind of idea, or are they voting for the party, right? The PAP, the party and government, because they want the person who they voted for to have access to government resources, so that the municipal concerns and the constituency and all of this can be well managed with greater resources. So I guess a lot of it comes down to that, right? Who is this person you're voting for, or is it the party or whatever? And if that person matters, then the personality does as well, right? And again, if candidates have a strong, appealing, attractive, charismatic personality, even a bit of charm, then that's a resource that ought to be used. And I think podcasts are really a very emerging space where the PAP clearly have found it useful, right? And they, to be quite honest, they've done very well on the podcast.
I agree.
The criticisms I saw were directed not at the guests, they were not directed at the PAP ministers, so on. They're more directed at the podcast themselves for being biased and not having a balance of speakers. But those who came on the show, they were. I mean, I think they were on the whole regarded quite well, and sadly, I think the opposition aren't really opposition politicians aren't really jumping onto this space as much as they should. I think you had Nicole Seah on yours, right?
I did.
Didn't she perform brilliantly? I mean, that was a magnificent performance, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. So you're right. Even last week, I think PM went on the daily catch up. And by by all measures, you can see that he comes across as personable and likable in that podcast, right? And it's a format that sometimes also I feel like mainstream media is also sometimes too serious, right? With the interviews and with the scripts, and also if you're going for the sound bites in the mainstream media interview, I guess it also hampers because you want to move on to the next topic. The next topic, you have a certain set of things. Whereas, Joe Rogan, the most successful podcaster in the world, right? It's 3 hours, right? And you can go on multiple tangents, right? But also 3 hours, you are going to be found out if you don't have.
For sure. You can't sustain that kind of, that kind of nuggeted
Right.
answers, right, for 3 hours. So, you will, something real comes out in that. In that space of time. And I mean, you don't have to have 3 hours, frankly, even half an hour, right?
Right,
Some
Indeed.
real thing
Indeed.
will emerge.
No, agreed, yeah. So there's a comment, some people don't think fast on their feet, so they don't do well in non-scripted settings. And point taken. I think there are different types of politicians, right? There are some people who may not speak well, but they're very close to their constituents. People like it, people like them on the ground. So there are different types. So what would your advice be to politicians in these upcoming elections about podcasts? What would your advice be? How should they use it? Who should go on? Who shouldn't go on?
Yeah. So, I don't mean to discredit this space, but of course, it's as much about style and it's as much about, kind of likability as it is about content, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the first thing is to have a kind of self-awareness, right, of how you appear on these kinds of spaces. And sometimes it can be improved, right? There's certain, like any kind of media appearance, you can be trained for it. And if it's important enough, I think it's worth a go, right? To come across. If you skip the podcast space, you're skipping a very important segment of potential voters, right? Why do I say this? I mean, I think at this point of time, the reach of podcast isn't really that big, right? In Singapore, especially. However, my understanding is that the people who generally tune into podcasts are people who are more thoughtful about current affairs. They're more articulate, I think. So these are people who have the capacity to amplify your message.
Right.
So you may be targeting a very niche group of people. It's narrowcasting, right? A very niche group of people. But those people can, they like you, or if you change their minds about who you are, right? If they didn't originally like you, but then they sort of see you for who you are, and then so on and so forth, and they see that you're not coming in with a heavily scripted kind of preachy message, and you're opening up, and you're sometimes self-deprecatory, which is also a style, right? A value in podcasts, and you can do all these things. It shows cultural literacy. It shows a certain kind of humility, whatever it is, right? And that endears you to that group.
100%.
So they become your ambassadors, your champions, and it would be a wasted opportunity if one were nervous, right?
Yeah.
Of course, having said that, also, I mean, you got to sort of, be quite clear about what are there particular ideological alignments? Are you walking into a trap?
Right.
All these kinds of things. But I think in Singapore currently the landscape is more open. I don't think any of the podcasts are gonna, kind of corner you or treat you with contempt or kind of. I haven't seen that, at least, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's something that would be particularly attractive to audiences.
Yeah, we don't have Stephen Secker or Mehdi Hassan, right? So politicians don't have to worry.
Don't have to worry.
Yeah. But unfortunately, they still do, right? I mean, you quoted this line that I mentioned in one of my earlier episodes, which I had forgotten about as well, which is it's difficult for me to get PAP folks on. Hopefully, that will change in this upcoming election, right? Because maybe they want, I don't know, maybe I don't know what they're thinking, but maybe some of them want a platform where it's safer, and so but it's not like I'm gonna ask super difficult questions, right?
Yeah, I've
But
only seen you rough once.
right.
I think it was an episode on colonial statues,
Oh,
right?
okay.
You pulled a decolonial kind of a sword out of your sheath.
Okay, fair. I accept that. But yeah, so I think what also I'm a bit I'm very intrigued by what you say because I agree because I'm a bit saddened if politicians think that they cannot do a podcast with
Yeah.
40 minutes and take questions from not a hostile but not a friendly
Mm,
interviewer, right?
mm,
I think I mean, do you really have the metal for politics if that
mm.
is the case, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
But there's been so much protectionism in our local
Yes.
political
Yes.
processes, right? I mean,
Yes.
like people, I mean, the common phrase that we used to use since the 90s was coming in on the coattails
Yeah.
of, right? So that whole sense
Yeah.
that, you're very gently brought in because at least the mythology is it's so hard to find great people,
Yeah.
right? So when you get them, you want to make sure that they have a reasonably easy time
Right.
of doing that well in this political system. So, and you've got a mainstream media generally that has been so, I don't know, so, kid glovesy, right,
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
with, with
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
politicians and overly respectful to the point of not even asking important questions.
100%.
So
100%. Yeah.
they're weaned on this kind of,
Yeah.
and then suddenly to be faced or to be confronted with real questions and questions that aren't just kind of there to make to give you a chance to humble brag or whatever, but
Yeah.
real questions that challenge you. I mean, I think that maybe that I'm sure they can do it, right? They're not without
Yes.
intellectual
Yeah.
prowess, right? It's just I think they're just not used to it.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
and they also, I think, at the back they might be also concerned that it's a slippery slope, right? If your politicians or your PAP ministers, your ruling party elite, are treated with what can look like disrespect, then that might be the starting of a different
Right.
kind of norm, right? And then of course their work of politics is going to be very
Right.
different if that became the norm, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I completely agree. I have something to say about that. Let me just read a couple of comments. Sinyi said, if I was a politician, I would worry about my words being taken out of context. I think that's a fair worry because you know how it is as well. People will clip like 20 seconds, and they'll do a mash of the video. So so I accept that.
No,
Yeah, the
but
kid
how
gloves.
is that different from appearing on any
Exactly,
media, right?
exactly. So yeah,
You will be a meme whether you like
yeah,
it or not,
yeah. Even your parliamentary speeches, right? Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's not different, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I had a comment about what you said about being self-deprecating, and I love politicians who can take a joke,
Mm,
can banter, who's not so thin-skinned that they
yeah.
cannot take a joke about themselves. If they show that they can laugh at themselves, I think you use the word endearing. I really think that they would go a long way in making the people feel, yeah, okay, he's one of us, she's one of us.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Did you see recently there was some short video by Heng Swee Keat,
I
right,
saw,
who sort
and
of played out.
I thought that is exact.
Yeah.
I thought he should have done that in the
Yeah.
campaign itself,
Yes.
in 2020, and just own the mistake and then make fun
Yeah.
of it,
Make
yeah.
fun of it, laugh at
Yes,
yourself, laugh in yourself in an authentic way, right? Not in
yes,
this is a
exactly.
strategy or a tactic,
Yeah,
but laugh at yourself.
he won points
Yeah.
with me for that, for sure. Yeah. So